Brothers and sisters, in the first reading today, King Zedekiah should be the most powerful person in the country, but he is cowardly and has no opinion. He wants to please everyone and not offend anyone. On one hand, he listened to what the prophet Jeremiah said, but on the other hand, he let his subordinate make plans to kill the prophet Jeremiah. And later, he saved the prophet Jeremiah's life. King Zedekiah understands he should have listened to the word of the prophet sent by God, but he often swayed between public opinion and the will of God. Do you wonder why in the first reading, so many people hate the prophet Jeremiah and want to put him to death? At the beginning of the chapter, the prophet Jeremiah prophesied, "Whoever stays in this city will die by the sword, famine, or plague. But whoever goes over to the Babylonians will live. They will escape with their life. They will live. This city will certainly be given into the hand of the army of the king of Babylon, who will capture it." Prophet Jeremiah loved his fellow man. The word to encourage his fellow man to surrender to Babylon will not come from the prophet Jeremiah's mind, but from the will of God. The whole nation, including the king, know that the prophet Jeremiah's words were right, but they refused to listen. God, through the prophet Jeremiah, has already provided them with a way out. If they do not turn to God, the circumstances will only get worse. Since the king did not listen to God's counsel given by his prophet, Babylon captured and destroyed Jerusalem in 587 BC and took the entire able-bodied citizen to Babylon as prisoner. Brothers and sisters, when we need to make decisions on important matters, God's will is more important or the opinion of other people's matter? If we already know what God's will is, do we still need to ask other people's opinion before making a decision? If we ask many people for their opinion in order to look for an answer that satisfies us, we are putting God's will aside, which is similar to King Zedekiah in the first reading. Today's gospel is a continuation of last week's gospel. The word gospel means good news. In today's gospel, the household will be divided, 3 against 2 and 2 against 3. It does not sound like good news. It is because today's gospel is a difficult passage to understand. The incarnation of Christ come to the world is to bring peace and unity. However, in today's gospel, Christ said, "Do you think I have come to bring peace to the earth? No, I tell you, but rather division." It sounds very strange. What does Christ mean by division? In our family, there's a lot of division, such as the division between eating meat and the vegetarian, the division between the family member who vote for NDP or Liberal. This type of earthly division is not what Christ taught about. Christ taught about the division is the struggle between good and evil, especially on the challenge of moral standard. In today's society, evil is packaged to become good. The ambiguity confuses a lot of people. For example, premarital sex and the use of contraceptive between the married couple sounds perfectly normal and correct in our society, but it is not allowed in the Catholic Church. The couple inside the family need to make a decision to follow the Catholic Church or the secular world. To be with Christ or against Christ is a decision that has the effect of judgment and division. Even though Christ did come to establish peace between God and man, that peace caused a division between those who accept it and those who reject it. In this way, Christ became a sign of contradiction. Even though it seems Christ being a sword and caused division, he is the bringer of true and lasting peace. At the beginning of the gospel, Christ also said to bring fire to the earth. The fire symbolized purification, associated with God's judgment and his wrath against sin. As a purifying force, fire burns hot. It burns up what are useless, removing impurity, leaving only that which is desirable, and refine what is impure. Christ brings the fire to consume and purify the world. This purified fire from Christ is challenging our moral conscience, and the purified heart, after burning, will lead us to a better conversion towards God. Today, Christ continues to cast fire on the earth, the fire of the Spirit through the ministry of word and sacraments. As a Christian, we should have fire inflaming people to care, to serve, and to bless each other with the gift of faith. We should work with the Holy Spirit to allow that fire to burn off impurity, our sinful and evil desire, our concupiscence in us, and to bring out the purity of gold and silver within us, which is our truth and goodness. From the gospel, Christ said, I have a baptism with which to be baptized, and what stress I am under until it is complete. The Greek word baptism means to dip or to be submerged. What Christ means by his statement is, I have a terrible experience through which I must pass, and life is full of tension until I pass through it and emerge triumphantly from it. In other words, the passion of the cross was constantly before Christ's eye. Christ was stressed until his work on the cross was complete, because he knew all the good that would come of it. Christ wasn't sprinkled with suffering. He was immersed in agony. In the same way, our baptism is an immersion of Christ's death, in which we die to sin and are reborn to the new life of grace. Prophet Jeremiah, as the spokesperson of God, does not fear the ruler King Zedekiah and his opponent, and speak out the truth. He became a lamp shining bright in the dark. As we have received the office of priest, prophet, and king during our baptism, we should courageously live out our religious convictions and principles in our life. Christ brings division because some follow him and others oppose him. We must make a decision to follow him or not, to share his baptism or not. The choice can result in division, even within families.